and welcome back to the Touchline Talk show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out every single week. This segment dedicated to looking ahead to that round of 16 in the World Cup. As I'm talking Wednesday night Eastern Time, we know most of the teams who will be participating. So I'm talking about obviously the matchups that have already been set, and I'm operating under the assumption that nothing dramatic is going to happen in these final games on Thursday morning Eastern time to wrap up the group stage. I will talk about that when I get to those games. So I'm just laying out a round of 16 as I expect it to happen. A couple matchups that are already set to start us off here. One side of the bracket, on one corner of the bracket, if you will, you've got Switzerland, Spain, Netherlands, South Africa. I talked last week about this idea that this World Cup, the next step was to prove that these teams, the expanded field, the teams that are coming in for the first time, second time, can be competitive. That it's not going to be a bunch of 13 nils. Obviously, that happened. The next step after that was, can some of these teams that are giving the traditional powers trouble actually put together multiple results and get to the round of 16? And that's happened too. New Zealand came so close, and we've got a couple examples here we're going to talk about of really incredible stories getting to the round of 16. One of them, South Africa. What this team has been through, I was reading a little while ago about how much the bonus money means to these players. The fact that they're actually getting compensated for playing soccer. It's an incredible story. And the way that they just kept scoring goals when they needed to find a way to win that last game and get second place in that group, absolutely incredible. So congratulations, South Africa. And it's one of those examples of this. This is what a World Cup is supposed to be. That nothing is guaranteed to anybody, and that's what you're seeing here in 2023. These matchups in particular, you got clear favorites in both of them. Spain, I know they got trounced by Japan. They should be fine. And the Netherlands have looked good to really good pretty much all tournament. Maybe not the most spectacular first 180 minutes, but had a great first half against the U.S., had a good game against Vietnam, looking just fine. So I'm picking Spain and the Netherlands. The other part of this, not only are they just better teams on paper, but if you look at the way that Switzerland and South Africa got here, they don't have this signature win where you look at it and you go, oh, they don't have the Colombia win over Germany where they can play with the best teams in the world. They did what they needed to in groups where you had some vulnerable teams. They pulled upsets, definitely. But there are levels to that, right? They didn't go beat a top 10 team in the world that everybody expects to be making the quarterfinals. They beat some teams you expect to get to the knockout stage. And so now you're up against a whole different level of opposition. And I just think it's going to be a little bit too much for both of them. Spain, though, have an interesting challenge here as a free-flowing team that scores a lot of goals against the Swiss team that just hasn't given up goals at this tournament. Hasn't been great offensively at times, but when you got a really good foundation, when you just don't give up goals, especially in a group stage where you had some teams in your group that didn't perform particularly well, you find a way to get one win across, you get a couple of clean sheets, and all of a sudden you're winning the group. That's the kind of consistency that gets you to the round of 16. To me, it just doesn't get you any farther than that. Then, the other side of that bracket is Japan and Norway, Sweden, United States. These the way that this played out provided some really good round of 16 matchups that we weren't necessarily supposed to get. And I want to start this conversation by pointing out how incredibly unlucky Japan and Sweden got. For me, they've been the best two teams at the tournament, and certainly two of the best 3 or 4, based on what we've seen so far. And what is their reward? Japan has to play a Norway team with Caroline Graham Hansen and potentially Ada Hegerberg, and Sweden has to play the United States because those two teams didn't do their job. And so now the teams that get punished are the ones that ran through their groups and looked spectacular. It's just the cruel reality of this tournament and the way that this bracket was set up with these strange pairings for the round of 16 and the weird results that happened here. There just isn't a quote-unquote easier path because it didn't line up the way that it was supposed to. And so Japan, Norway, I've been saying this, that I've given up on Norway. I really want to believe in them. They're that team that I will always convince myself they have a chance. I'll never be surprised if Norway beat anybody. I wouldn't be surprised if they win this game. And obviously, Ada Hegerberg's health is going to be a big question heading in. This Japanese team is just playing too well for me, though. They've been spectacular. And the talent gap is not all that large between the two. Norway's got the better top-end players, but Japan is probably better across the board, more depth, those kind of things. So it's essentially a toss-up to start with. One team is feeling great. The other team is not feeling good at all. Give me the team feeling great. I'll take Japan. And then we get to Sweden, USA. The fascinating part of this is that whoever wins this game should be looked at as the favorite to get out of this side of the bracket. Of course, these were the two teams when you looked at it from a U.S. perspective heading in. Sweden was the most scary team on the road to the final. And if Sweden win this game, after what they've already done, if they dispatch the United States, then clearly they're the team to beat on this side. If the U.S. win, my thought process is they've done enough and fixed enough that if they can beat Sweden, they should beat everybody else too. It will be such a dramatic turnaround from what we've seen so far that all of a sudden you got to start treating the U.S. like one of the favorites to win the tournament again. So it just creates a fascinating dynamic in this game. I'm picking Sweden. The gap is not that large to begin with. And I just haven't seen any reason to believe that a U.S. team without Rose Lavelle is going to look miles better than what we've seen through 3 games. Maybe that was the wake-up call they needed. But I would argue the first half against the Dutch was the wake-up call they needed. And they've responded for a half, and then they laid another dud. There's a real argument Sweden is the better team at this moment in time. Clearly the more informed team. And they're just not intimidated by this U.S. side at all. So I'm picking Sweden. Different scenario, I would be picking the U.S. And you got to look at if you win that group, you're facing South Africa with Spain hypothetically up next, as opposed to having to go through the 2 most impressive teams in the tournament so far to even get to the semifinals. But that's the reality of the situation. Japan and Sweden also have to go through each other to get to that semifinal game. It makes for a fascinating bit of television and incredible drama. So that is one side of the bracket. Moving over to the other side. Australia, Denmark, France, Germany. And I set these matchups up assuming that Germany finishes behind Colombia. Colombia already on 6 points. That's as many as Germany can get. So if Colombia gets a point, they're top of the group. I'm just going to assume that happens, which sets up these matchups and moves Colombia to the other game that I'll talk about in a minute. Australia, of course, the big question is Sam Kerr. That being said, they just played a must-win game without Sam Kerr and were brilliant against a very good battle-tested Canada team. You saw all kinds of attacking depth, all kinds of players chipping in, making things happen. That is really, really positive if you're a supporter of the Matildas. And it did an awful lot to erase some of the bad vibes and the stress. Now you're through. It's a completely new game. You just got to beat Denmark, and then you go again. And if you don't have Sam Kerr for this game, maybe you have her for the next one. I'm assuming they're going to do what they did last time and just play it to the very end so that nobody knows whether she can actually go or not, or whether she's going to take the field. I'm still taking Australia in this game after what I saw against Canada. The few times I've watched Denmark over the past couple years, it just looks so difficult in attack. And I know Pernilla Harder has a few actual raw production numbers in this game, in this tournament. She's got a goal. In the last game, she's got an assist. But from a chance creation, goals from open play standpoint, they're going to need more for her, or somebody is going to have to step up because they're just not getting enough. They've really had to work for the goals that they've scored. Australia could have had 5 or 6 against Canada with how good they were in attack. To me, it's just going to be too much for Denmark to deal with. I just feel like Denmark is one of those teams that has a high floor and a low ceiling. You trust them to do what they're supposed to do to get to the round of 16, but then once they face the better opposition, I don't see them being able to pull this off. With a rejuvenated Australia at home, people are feeling good, believing again after that Canada game. To me, it's going to be too much, and Australia goes through. Then France, Germany. This is right up there with Sweden, United States in terms of games of the round of 16. France got to rest some players for that last group stage game, gave up some goals, scored a bunch of goals. Don't really know what to take away from that. And France in general just had a confusing group stage because you have the draw with Jamaica that sends alarm bells. Then you go back and you beat Brazil. Looked great at times, not so great at others. I'd argue it was a pretty even game. You found a way to get your set piece goal for Rennie Renard and get the 3 points. Then you score a bunch of goals and also concede goals to a team that you really shouldn't be conceding 3 goals to. So what do you make of it all? And then in all of this, that Jamaica draw starts looking better and better because Brazil couldn't score on them either. So I don't really know how to feel about this France team heading into the knockout stage. I'm pretty much where I was at the beginning. I haven't seen anything horrible or impressive enough to change my mind. To me, they're a round of 16 to quarterfinal team depending on the matchups. I picked Germany to win this tournament. Still waiting to see that third game, so don't have as much data. But I'm just not overly worried about the loss to Colombia. Maybe that's a wake-up call that this team responds to and raises their game up to another level. I'm picking Germany to win this one. To me, they're just the better team. They're the healthier team. There do seem to be much more positive vibes coming out of France. So I did have to think about this longer than I would have, a month ago or even the start of this tournament. But I'm not betting against Germany. I'm just not going to do it. And if I am, it's not going to be France. It's going to be a team that is in the very upper echelon. And France to me is just a tier below that. So I've got Germany going through. And then our last two, England, Nigeria, Colombia, Jamaica. These are the other two teams that deserve an immense round of applause and congratulations. Nigeria, dealing with so much from a federation standpoint, lack of support, frustration, and they get out of that group of death. The really difficult group with no bad teams, and they find a way. It's a terrific story. This is a good team that got some attention early for the Canada game, getting that draw, and continued to build from there. Then you've got Colombia, Jamaica. Again, I'm assuming Colombia is going to win that group by doing what they need to in that final game that has not been played as I record this. And here is Jamaica. Got destroyed at the last World Cup. Program has been shut down due to funding recently. So they had to kind of re-energize and rebuild it heading into that 2019 World Cup. You've got this very strange collection of some high-level players. Bunny Shaw, obviously starring in the WSL. You've got some other players with English backgrounds, just like the men's team. You've got your Shayna Matthews. Then you have, the teenagers and the players in college and the players without clubs. It's just a incredible collection that has come together again with all of the federation frustrations and not feeling like they're getting the support they need. And yet here they are. They go through the group stage and don't give up a goal. Did it look pretty? No. Especially against Brazil. France, maybe it looked a little bit better. Brazil, it was very much just defend for 90 minutes because you came in knowing you're the team that has that advantage. You only need the draw. The initiative is on Brazil. And to their credit, they just defended exceptionally well for 90 minutes. And, it's not like Brazil missed 14 clear-cut chances. They kept trying, and there was always somebody from Jamaica stepping up. Whether that was, defenders, midfielders, goalkeeper. Everybody just did their part, defended as a team, and got the draw that they needed. Which makes this matchup against Colombia fascinating. Because I kind of expected that Linda Caicedo was going to match up against a traditional power here. And instead, we got the exact opposite. We got Linda Caicedo against the team that nobody expected to be here. But this team that nobody expected to be here has been spectacular defensively. So something's got to give, which is going to make this a really cool matchup. And, of course, one of these teams is headed to the quarterfinals, which is an incredible story in and of itself. And Jamaica have essentially been playing, knockout-style games from a tactical, philosophical standpoint from the beginning of this tournament. So they are very much used to the way that they're going to have to play to continue advancing. It's what they've been doing from the beginning. Defend, look for counters, absorb pressure, all that stuff. Nothing changes for them because it's now the knockout stage. And then, of course, your other team in here is England. Don't have too much to say about England other than they're looking like the team they're supposed to. It will be interesting to see how Serena Wiegman decides to handle the number 6 position if Kira Walsh is not able to participate in this game and what that ends up looking like. That is something to monitor here. Ultimately, though, if you're England, you are chomping at the bit to have these three teams standing in the way of you getting to the semis. You're going to have to face somebody from the other side of the bracket, whether that's France, whether that's Germany, whether that's Australia. But you have three teams that are significantly worse than you from a talent perspective. Everybody else has somebody that scares you before the semifinals. You've got Spain and the Netherlands who are going to have to meet. Some combination of Japan, Sweden, USA. You could even throw Norway in there if you want to. France and Germany are going to meet, and then one of them is going to play Australia or Denmark. England has two games that are essentially continuations of the group stage. Now, Colombia showed they've got no problem taking down teams of England's caliber. They already beat Germany. So it's not to say that this is a guarantee. Don't exist in this tournament anymore. But when you have two games that line up this way, that you can avoid facing somebody who is on your level from a talent standpoint until the semifinals, when this could have been Canada or Australia instead of Nigeria, and then Germany, you got to be counting your lucky stars if you're England. And you got to take advantage of the opportunity. And then the question becomes, what happens in that semifinal game when somebody else has kind of had to go through a gauntlet to get there, and England might not have to get out of second or third gear? Now, they're going to be difficult games. I'm not saying England's going to win them both 5-0. But there is something about facing the highest level opposition that England is not going to have to do to the same degree as other teams to get deep into this tournament. So it creates a fascinating storyline in that sense as well. I'm taking England, and I'm going to take Colombia. I would not be surprised at all if Jamaica wins that game, in all honesty. But, you know, Bunny Shaw looks like she's carrying some kind of knock. I'm sure they're emotionally drained, physically exhausted from all of the work they put in. Colombia just have to be feeling good. They're going to have the best player on the field, potentially. I guess you could argue Bunny Shaw. But Linda Caicedo's just been spectacular. And then you get a Linda Caicedo and Lauren James matchup in the quarterfinals. Yes, please. So this is setting up very nicely. That is the World Cup round of 16 preview.